Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rituals of Strength. I'm your host, Kevin Secours, and this week we are going to be going deep into the world of touch. Touch specifically within a self-defense dynamic, and even more specifically within everyday communication, its effects on escalation of aggression, and a deep look at intervention. Now, you don't need to go far on the internet. Google, go on YouTube to find tons of videos of touch being used ineffectively, inappropriately. I'm going to try to include some clips here in a little montage, but the minute I do, I invariably get flagged. And if they're too severe, it affects the visibility of the video. So I'm going to leave it to you to do most of that work. There are certainly tons of videos of police, usually in excessive force, dynamic outrages. And the first thing I want to say is, guys, that the majority of police out there, and I know this because I train them worldwide, are good people and they manage their stress well. But as someone who has been an interventionist for a long time, I can tell you that we are all prone to making mistakes. There are different degrees to those mistakes, but we're all prone to making them. So let us look at these videos first as an example of what can happen. If it can happen to them, maybe it can also happen to us. There are tons of videos on push being used in self-defense. I certainly advocate it, particularly with multiple attackers. It's a good way for making space. But, we got to make sure we're not being too cavalier about it. And as we're going to see, there are lots of things we should do first, if we can, before we push another human being. Now, law is different everywhere. I live in Canada, and here it's quite strict. But it is quite akin to most places in Europe and some places in the US. I recognize that for some of our American counterparts, there is much more leniency in what they do. But a general and very safe and good guideline, particularly for professionals, is to only use force when it is both reasonable and necessary. Reasonable means if you have 100 people in a room and you ask them what would they do, the majority would do what you did. And necessary means you had no other option. And those options absolutely include just walking away or running away. If you can escape or otherwise avoid the harm, then it wasn't necessary. So it's very rarely necessary to push someone. And depending how we do it, it may not be reasonable. So we need to look at first, do we have time to establish boundaries? If we do, the best way to do so is to have our hands up and open in what Jeff Thompson terms the fence. I've advocated Thompson's book many, many times, and I have likewise said that many people like Thompson himself, the creator of the term, and many of the proponents who use it, touch far too casually and far too aloofly. Generally, when my hands come up, they are like a buoyant, elastic barrier. And I'm trying never to initiate touch with you unless I absolutely have no other choice. If someone comes too close, I will let that frame come in only so close, and then I will myself flank out, zone out to one side. So even if I was in an elevator, I would be sidestepping and trying to keep space. And if I must establish touch, it's going to be kind of an elastic barrier. I very rarely do the hard finger poke, hard palm slam, certainly very rarely the throat chopping tiger jaw kind of hits that we see so casually being taught in many self-defense circles. And we've got to be careful what we're putting in our systems, guys, because we are what we repeatedly do. If you have a scenario where you verbally define your limits, you're giving clear commands, you're trying to de-escalate, you're trying to maintain space, you have your fence up and you're trying to move evasively, and they repeatedly ignore those barriers and limits, then yes, we may have absolute justification for slightly harder things like pushes or even hits and attacks. Sometimes there is no window for any of it, and they come right into our space and we get shocked. So I want to make a particular note about that, because we got to be really careful about what we're training. If I had a choice, it's personal choice, you can disagree with this, and somebody runs up and ambushes me, they just run into my space, I don't know in that flicker of a second if they're aggressive, if they have mental illness, if they're like, hey, you dropped your wallet. I don't know what it is. So I don't want to just train myself through thousands of repetitions to become hair triggered and just drill them in the face. I would far rather fence and move out to the side, zone out to one side as quickly as I can, and to flank them. That's my choice, because there are far less legal consequences to doing that. If I twitch and evade and maintain space preemptively, I'm not going to get in trouble. But if I smack you and you had some valid intention, or you had some, I don't know, you're severely autistic, or you're not respecting personal space, or you mistook me for someone you thought you knew, or a host of things that could have otherwise justified it, other than you being an assailant, I want to make sure that I'm safe. That's my choice. Self-defense can be a little bit more nuanced. So I'm going to speak first to the idea of intervention and what's often called therapeutic touch. Now, you might think I'm not an interventionist, but for example, here in Canada, 1 in 4 people are responsible for caring for an elderly loved one. Very often, those afflictions involve things like dementia, medications that can alter their states. So imagine if you had to use this with your loved ones. I travel a lot, and everywhere that I go, I see drugs on the rise. Here in Canada, we have more and more fentanyl coming in all the time. Certainly, in Montreal, where I am, we're not yet at an American level of epidemic, but we're getting there. The west coast of Canada has been severely afflicted, and it's moving its way eastward. In Europe, I see the same thing. Most places I go, drugs are on the rise. I do not see a lot of places, I can't think of any offhand, where drugs are diminished or all but gone. Therefore, you might be dealing with somebody who's on drugs, and they may not be an immediate threat, and there might be a justification or an onus on you to avoid. Also, here in Canada and in most of the places I travel, we see funding and services for mental health being cut routinely. So there are more and more people that are homeless and on the streets that have mental afflictions. Tent cities. I have one just within a stone's throw of my house. So you are encountering people that can absolutely be threats, but in many cases they can be better handled than just through violence. So there's lots of different reasons why we might want an interventionist mindset, or at least an understanding of it. Generally, if I look at medical research across the spectrum, whether we're talking about patient care, excited delirium, hostage negotiations, conflict de-escalation, etc., generally we want to avoid touching prematurely. If it can be done without touch, then we absolutely seek to do it that way. For 11 years now, I've been teaching at our local college for our applied criminology faculty, and I teach interventionists who will go forward to be workers in rehab centers and homeless shelters, and working with delinquent teens, and a host of services like this, including social service. These people go into active stages, they do their field work, and they come back to me, and then they go into the field and they stay in touch with me. So I know what it is like in that field. I know what the challenges are, and I know what the threats are. And let me assure you, it is never beneficial to be casual or absent-minded about how, when, or where you touch someone. I'm going to be giving you a variety of different models from research, some acronyms and steps and different ideas. They overlap at some level and they can be synthesized. I saw no need to create a new acronym or some kind of new hybrid. One thing that drives me crazy is that people are so often trying to sell a product or a new take on something rather than just give you the buffet. So I'm giving you a consolidated buffet, but I'm giving you ideas that have been well vetted by research that you can then interpret, cherry pick, take from them what you wish. So in the so-called behavior change model, there are 6 basic steps. Now, the very first step a subject can find themselves in the behavior change model is the pre-contemplation phase. A pre-contemplation phase means that the subject's not aware that there's a problem. If I was an interventionist and I'm dealing with a drug addict and they're not aware that they're an addict, the very first step would be to gently make them aware of that. And there are different ways we can go into that, and we're going to talk about things like motivational interviewing shortly. In an escalated encounter, sometimes people get really mad and they do get in your space, and they don't realize how aggressive or offensive they're being in that moment because the cognitive portion of their brain is kind of being overridden. And oftentimes when you see testimonies or people talking after a violent encounter, they feel regret and remorse, and they were under the effects of cognitive constriction. The second phase would be the contemplation phase. This is where oftentimes in aggression, there's a pause, a moment of silence. Maybe the eyes dart around, they look for witnesses, they see if they have backup, they become silent, they scope you up and down, right? That's the contemplation phase. That's the first half the first body of aggression cues that we can see. And then the second body is the third phase, which is the preparation phase. And that's where people start to shed clothes, they start to reach on their body for weapons, they adjust themselves, the chins come down, the eyes narrow, maybe they start to develop momentum like they're going to hit you. So just within the domain of aggression cues, of non-intentional, non-verbal predictive cues, which can indicate aggression's coming, but they're not always a guarantee. We have those two phases, the contemplation and then the actual physical preparation. Then we get to the action phase. The action phase for us guys is quite obvious. Someone starts touching, they start moving, grabbing, pushing, or open assault. So there's no confusion there. And then we have two phases that apply more to intervention when you're dealing with things like addiction or mental illness, where you have a maintenance phase. This is usually where somebody is trying to, at risk of relapsing, let's say, and you're trying to intervene to prevent the relapse. And then finally you have the relapse where they're returning to their old patterns. Now, within a verbal de-escalation, there is always a very real risk that we get someone starting to calm down and we trigger a relapse by introducing words or ideas that we didn't need to introduce, or by talking too much, or by rushing things. So we can deal with those. But generally, it's the first four phases, the pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, and action that we're looking at. So one way to look at it is when you're doing your role playing, when you're doing your training, or when you're doing your visualization, if you see yourself responding with a physical action at one of the first two phases, pre-contemplation or contemplation, you got to ask yourself, was it reasonable and necessary? Was there really a risk? If we intercept the preparation phase, it needs to be justified. What was the preparation? Was I preparing to take out a weapon, preparing to grab a weapon off the counter or pull something out of my pocket? Then it might be justified. But if I'm getting up and I'm just starting to mobilize and I'm yelling and my hands are flaying, that might be a little bit excessive if I, give you a 300 kick for Sparta and drive you into the wall. So you got to look at it. So those four phases can be helpful. And what I'll do in my role playing when I design them is I'll often take those first four, and sometimes I'll merge the last two, the maintenance and the relapse, into just a relapse phase. And I'll try to design a ceiling on a drill wherein it doesn't go beyond preparation, or where it will trigger to action, and that I want to see what kind of action you're going to respond with to see whether or not it's proportionate. And then I might have a phase where it starts to go down, but that even if you do everything right, they start to relapse, to see how you deal with it. Because sometimes we lower our guard when we think things are done. So those are very helpful in structuring role-playing, visualization. If you're journaling, if you're imagining something, think of what those various phases would look like and what kind of strategies you would use. Probably the most evidence-supported behavioral change method is known as motivational interviewing. And it's something that is widely used in the faculty where I teach. It's widely accepted in social work and in the mental health hospitals, or hospitals for that matter. It has made its way into policing and more tactically constrained versions. I'm going to give you a brief intro to it. You can absolutely go and read more on this if you like. The first core principle is empathy over confrontation. Now, whenever I put stuff out, there's always people saying, oh, you're taking a compassionate perspective. There are a lot of people out there in the self-defense world who are like, hit them first and screw the rest, right? And I've spoken about this at length in previous podcasts. If that is your perspective, fine. That is not nuanced enough for me. That does not serve me. That is not what I want to be. I've been in hundreds of interventions, and it has never served me to be prematurely aggressive. Yes, sometimes I have prematurely struck. Yes, I am happy that I intervened and I survived. But there are always risks. Sometimes I was right. Sometimes I was wrong. But generally, even when I did that, I did it from a basis of empathy first. I was always trying to avoid and de-escalate. Just in the world of bouncing, I have worked with people who will literally not define their limits well, stand there and try to look tough, and then if you just get up, whether you could be a drunk girl, and they will smack, they will push you back, start screaming, they go from 0 to 60 with nothing in between. This to me is irresponsible. This is not what I want to be. I have no interest in training to be like that. So if you are training in an approach, the first thing I would say is be careful, because you are what you repeatedly do. If every aggression ends with you spearing into another human, blitzing them with overwhelming force, and then stomping on their head when they drop, I submit to you, you are training for one intensity, and that is very high level force, and there are severe consequences to that. So it's your choice if that's what you want. Within motivational interviewing, one thing that we always try to do after empathy over confrontation is to highlight discrepancies. What is it that you think you're doing, and what is it that you're doing? So, for example, if I have enough time to talk with someone and I say, hey man, what's going on here? When the guy says, he gives me all these reasons, and I say, okay, why are you holding a bottle? What, you got a bottle in your hand. Sometimes people will look down. I give an example of, I think it's in my book, Safe School, of a guy at a psychiatric hospital that I had to intervene on, who took a pen and started speed stabbing his hand as he was going. And I told him he was bleeding and had a wound and I wanted to help him, but I needed him to drop it first. And at the time, there was so much blood, I thought he had some kind of small knife. I didn't even know it was a pen. So bringing awareness to a discrepancy in their action, the discrepancy between their action and their intention, sometimes can work.
Good. What's going on, man?
Thank you so much. Right. Need a new phone?
Okay. How are you paying for your new phone?
$1 million. I have no weapons.
Well, not anymore, because I took a knife out of your pocket.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I wasn't gonna kill you. I love you, officer.
Yep.
The classic example in an intervention where you're dealing with an addict is to say, why do you take, meth? Makes me feel good. It's the only time I feel safe and successful. And then you bring their awareness slowly and they start to admit all the things that are falling apart in their life. And you ask, is that making you feel good? And you bring an awareness to the fact that, the reason I started is not being achieved. So that takes a certain amount of time in a compressed time frame. But sometimes something as simple as, well, why you got a gun in your hand? Well, why are you doing that? And so what does he have to do with it? Just as if you are you're just interested in finding out what the motive is for the action, can be enough to create that schism. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it can lead to a slight escalation that you got to deal with. A very big step in motivational interviewing is to reinforce autonomy. And so whenever I interview, I always use phrases like, look, man, it's up to you. At the end of the day, it's your choice, brother. You're the one who has the power in this circumstance. I'm just telling you how it looks on the outside. My job is this. It's up to you. I talk about it in my book, Safe School. One of my good friends and one of my senior students, Jordan Bill, he takes it down a very negative route where he's like, listen, man, it's up to you. I can't stop you. If you want to beat me up, smack me up, we can go to the hospital. You'll do better than I will. I'm going to get all injured. And you want to deal with the police and talk to them all night and spend your night in jail, that's your choice. I would rather just go home, make some nachos and watch TV, but it's up to you, man. I'm just trying to understand what's going on. And he has that tone and the size and the facial expression, the demeanor and the experience, and it works for him. So I want to make a point here that I'm going to introduce lots of different methods. Some of them you will know outrightly, I cannot do this now, yet, or ever. It doesn't match my nature. Others you might try and they don't work so well and they require more practice, and some will just fit better right away. All are fine, but you, the individual, matter more than any system. So you need to honestly recognize where you're at. Jordan, who I was just discussing, he gets this very deadpan face. He has a very deep baritone voice. This works for him super well. I do less of that. I tend to speak very fast and I have to slow myself down and put emphasis and listen, brother, it's up to you. You're the one with the power here. I'm just asking. And you ask questions. This works very well for me because I'm super polite by nature in my everyday life. Other people are very nonverbal. I worked with one guy named Gus who would be like, and then he could just point at something to bring somebody's awareness, like camera, cops. And he was amazing at this because he was nonverbal. For me to do that would be unnatural because I always have a higher level of verbality. But this idea of reinforcing autonomy and giving a reminder to the aggravated subject that, listen, man, the ball's in your court here. I'm just trying to understand. This is a really powerful tool. We should always have 2 or 3 sort of power return phrases that we use. As a bouncer, the number one cause of fights I've seen were ego. The fuck you, push fight, you looking at my girlfriend, the guy gets insulted, you're afraid to lose face. When you get somebody like that, you go, I'm terribly sorry. No, I thought that was my friend's sister. I was just waving. I mistook the person. It's my mistake, my bad, brother. Sorry, but let me buy you a beer. Fight's gone most of the time, right? If you apologize and return the power to them, give a valid excuse, it's incredibly powerful.
Pins are underneath the fucking back of this, and they're underneath the fucking hood.
All right, what are you cussing at me for, bro?
I don't know.
Hey, what's your name? First name?
John.
John. Okay, I was called here.
Oh.
So when I come here and I find this and I can't find a VIN, right? I have a job to do. Okay? So let's start out different. All right, let's start different. All right, and let's go from there. So can you show me where the VINs are?
In motivational interviewing, sometimes once we've given power back, we can also start to trigger self-preservation, like Jordan was doing in that previous example of, listen, man, if you want to spend the night talking to cops and going to the hospital, whatever else, that's fine. I get it. That's your choice. Phrases like, look, is this really how you want this to turn out? You know how this is going to go. Look, my boss needs me to get you out of the bathroom. You're not allowed doing drugs in here. The last thing I want to do is get all mangled up. I'll never say fuck you up, hurt you, arrest you. I'll always throw it on myself. I usually self-deprecate to give them the power. But like the last thing I want to do is go get more stitches at the hospital and get an alter. It's just my job, man. I'm asking you, can you just stop, take it outside? No harm, no foul. I don't want this. Is this really how you want it to go? And even if you trounce me to the ground, they're going to send him back up. My boss is going to call cops. He has zero tolerance for this. I'm asking you, we still have time here. I'm giving you a choice. Can we take this outside? Bringing it back to, is this how you want this to turn out? Is this really how you want to spend the rest of your night? You're here with your friends at this table. You're having a great time. I'm sorry that he bumped you guys a mistake. We'll space this out a little bit. Let's give each other some time to breathe. Let's go back to having fun. None of us need this to erupt. This reminder of self-preservation is amazing. For almost a decade, I taught security at our local airport. And one thing that was very successful was for our agents to say, listen, I'm talking to you right now. Just in this hall right here, we have about 100 cameras, about 370 cameras in the airport overall. No matter what you do to me, no matter what I do back, those cameras are going to see everything. They're going to send back up. Even if you manage to get away, they're going to have your face. They may have your license plate if you get into a car. Let's take a second before this goes somewhere that I can't help you out. Right? That kind of thing, focus on self-preservation, is amazing. And then another component would be offering, right? Very low consequence, low effect options, better options, which you saw heavily overlapped in what we were doing there. The example I always give is, do say what you want them to think of, avoid saying what you don't want them to think of. I don't want to fight you. Don't make me call the cops. You're introducing negatives. I'll say things like, I just want to get home and see my son, man. I just want to have supper. I've been working a 12-hour shift. Please, man, please. Let's just take a step back and take a second while we still have time. This is just fantastically effective and way more appropriate most of the time than pushing someone back or screaming at them. It depends on the scenario, but very often, if there is slightly more time, I will always come, because I'm coming from a position of empathy over confrontation. If it gets into the domain of harm, my goal is harm reduction, not harm elimination. Harm elimination is I'm going to drive through and smash you in the face. But if somebody's going to self-harm or they're just generally dangerous, it can be dangerous to me. It can be dangerous to me. Even if somebody's holding a knife, but they're a broken bottle and they're quite agitated. I'll take space. I'll say, look, I don't want to get in your space, brother. I'm just going to step back a little bit. Can you do me a favor? Listen, as long as you're holding that thing, they're going to send backup. People are going to see it. They're going to freak out. Can you just do me a favor and please place the knife back down on the counter so we can have a little talk? I'm not here to cause any trouble. I just don't want this to kick off. This has been really effective. I've intercepted lots of people with broken shards of bottles and sometimes with knives, or, they got the clenched fist and they're holding the other guy by the shirt. And I'm like, listen. We have a second here to slow this down and then to stop it. Let's take another direction. Do me a favor. Leave go of his lapel. All right. Adjust the shirt. You step back a step. You step back a step. Hold on. what's going on here? And then I start to ask questions.
Something
It's
similar
this
happened.
every fucking time when I try to leave. She freaks the fuck out on me and then makes me look like the bad fucking
I
guy.
get it. I can see how that could be
Hey
frustrating.
man,
So,
do you mind just taking your hands out of your pocket?
Sorry, it's just my phone.
Okay,
so,
alright.
so
Appreciate it.
what do you think the plan for the day is? Just
I'm trying to fucking leave.
Do you think that's the best thing?
Yes, I've
Okay.
been trying to fucking leave.
Gotcha. Okay. And is it
And
just
I'm trying to keep
fair?
her away from that situation because she doesn't need to be called those names and like.
Yep. I hear you, and I can see that you're upset about it, and I would be upset too if I was in your situation.
I will always try harm reduction first. Do people sucker punch? Do they say fuck you when they swing? Absolutely. So you always need that fence up and you're ready to shield. I have tons of videos of this all over YouTube freely on escorting and sucker punching. When we flank, we're usually off to the angle of one person. And if there's multiples, I try to go to the angle of the closest person. So I have maximum distance between the others and myself, and that I'm in a superior vantage or cut angle on the person that's closest. I never stand in the middle. I never take the position that's given to me. There is a school in de-escalation that's known as behavioral reinforcement, where you take opportunities to acknowledge things that are done right. And one thing that I say all the time in verbal de-escalation or in soft skill training for self-defense is that we have thousands of opportunities in our daily life to practice them. Parenting is an amazing opportunity for this one. Disagreeing with your friend over politics or religion or a heated topic, an amazing opportunity for this one. But it's to acknowledge, as Ken Blanchard said in the 1 Minute Manager, catch them doing something right. Like, hey, well, that's a really good point. Or you see somebody's getting really mad and they take a step back like they want to hit you. And you literally take a step back too and say, you know what, that's a good idea. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space. This is getting too heated. Let's take this down a notch. You acknowledge the action. I've had situations where people are looking around the room and they're all aggressive and you can tell they're angry. They're looking to see who's watching. Am I going to get in trouble? And I say, you know what, man, you're right to be concerned about who's around us. This looks really bad. Let's stop for a second. One of my colleagues had a guy with a knife pulling out and he goes, listen, I totally understand the knife. I see that you're feeling threatened here. You're feeling like we're stepping on your toes. I'm going to give you a few steps back. And he takes a few steps back. All I'm going to ask you to do is just please lower the knife for a second so we can have a conversation. And then from lowering the knife, he says, all right, do me a favor. Can you close the blade on that thing? And that's a fine motor skill. And you see the guy starting to fidget with it like an angry caveman. And it was beautiful. It was poetry in motion, right? So catching somebody doing something right when you identify a behavior, like somebody going into the show, whoa, I see you going into your pockets and your pants. I could just hit you because I think you're going for a weapon. But if there's enough time, if there's enough confidence in it, if the timing feels good, I can say, whoa, hold on a second. Can you just do me a favor and please stop moving your hands? Take a look at me for a second. I see you fidgeting around for something. I can obviously tell that you're feeling escalated, and I don't want to contribute anything to that. But you fidgeting around with your hands is making me really nervous too. Let's just take a second. I'm asking you, please, you stop moving your hands. I'm going to stop moving mine. All right? That kind of thing can be extremely effective. But that's coming from a place of mature confidence, ego-free. I'm not trying to make some sizzle reel on YouTube where smash, I look all impressive and I'm beating the crap out of my students. This is reality. This is intervention. Imagine you have to intervene on your grandfather with dementia. Are you going with rapid fire hammer fists, or would you like to have some softer skills, right? Now, it's somebody else's grandfather on the street. You want to casually smack that person? Now, maybe it's not a geriatric, maybe it's somebody your age or even younger, but they're wafer thin and they're completely stoned out of their mind or obviously not mentally well. Would you not like to have some options for them? And we can slowly work our way across that spectrum of threat. And as it gets closer to something that, yeah, that is threatening to me, wouldn't you like to have the confidence to have options other than blitz and destroy, which can have legal and social and moral consequences? So that's really how I look at things. I'm always trying to find out if I have a chance, if I have a choice, I'm trying to de-escalate. I'm trying to empathize and avoid confrontation. That's my mindset.
This week's episode is brought to you by kevinsecours.com. Use the coupon code NUTCRACKER, all caps, to get 30% off everything on the site until December 26, 2025, or visit anytime to learn from our 700 hours of online content. Thanks for watching.
So this notion of taking these little micro steps would be what in psychology or in de-escalation strategies are called removing negative influence, removing negative influencers. I'm just going to take a step back. You know what? Cops will do this sometimes. They realize you don't have a knife. They misread you and they say, all right, do me a favor. Just sit on the sidewalk. I'm going to put my gun away. We're going to have a conversation. They take major distance. Very effective, right? I always view, and I've said it everywhere, that escalation or conflict is like a flight of stairs. I want to be the last one to go up those stairs and the first one to try to go down those stairs. I'm always trying to bring you back down. I'm really not volunteering to escalate. But if it triggers fast and I think I have no option, that's where I'll blitz and go in and attack. But it's very rare. It's very rare that time is so compressed that we have no choice. So often in these self-defense demos, they say things like, well, when you have no choice, you got to go, we're going to do this. And then they spend 95% of their time training an eventuality that only happens very rarely, if ever. And while it may seem sensational and it's better for marketing, and it's certainly devoured by our egos, it is not what you're going to need to do most of the time. Most of my stories from bouncing, most of my stories from bodyguarding are not exciting. They are long, protracted de-escalations that are only really appreciated by people who understand the craft, the trade craft of being out there, diffusing and de-escalating. If all you want is war stories, they're not going to sound cool to you because you only got a hammer, so you're only looking for nails.
She's choking me! She's choking me! She's choking me!
Deb, there's a camera back there recording you right now. And they see I am nowhere near you.
You're choking me, you slit me! You know what you slit me! You know what you did!
Deborah, nobody's even touching you.
She told me! She said she would hurt me!
Okay, can you sit up and talk to me real quick, please?
You think I can sit up? You idiot!
Come here.
Another component within behavioral change or motivational interviewing is sometimes called shaping. And shaping is controlling your environment, right? If we look at like an ecological approach to psychology, we know that our behavior is affected and created by its coupling with our environment. So anything I can do to take micro steps to shape my environment will be like, hey, can you do me a favor and come over here? The example I give all the time for school teachers is if I'm in an argument with a student and I'm standing with my back to the mass of the class and the aggressor is standing in front of me and yelling at me, as they look past me, they can't help but notice there's an audience behind me. And that is likely to elicit the audience effect, the idea of saving face. They feel embarrassed. But if I just turn sideways and have them side by side and the audience is to our mutual side, it's better. If I can get them to have their back to the class, say, look, just look at me for a second, and I just guide them over and I make a funnel with my hands, better, because now they don't see it. Can you do me a favor? Can you just step outside for 1 second? I'll be with you in a minute. They walk into the hallway, and then I walk with my back to the door frame. So I'm in the door frame. I can see my class and I can see the person. I can have a conversation with them. They are no longer seeing the classroom. They're now in a different setting. I've shaped their environment. If I was getting into an argument with someone in a bathroom when I was a bouncer, and I can just get them to come out of the bathroom stall so we have more space and I can take a step back, it's much better. There's no easy way for me to be talking to you when you're in a bathroom stall without amplifying the fact that you're cornered. If you're in a corner, it's not a great thing. Cornered animals attack. So if I can step back and give you space, say, do me a favor, just step over here. Sometimes we stay stuck in that corner because we're angry. So I will ask somebody to move out. Paramedics will ask you to sit down repeatedly. They'll reiterate it 100 ways to get you to sit down and calm down. They'll get you to drink a glass of water, right? You want some water, pass the guy a bottle of water. When I was working event security, giving somebody water and getting them to take a drink, plastic, empty, crushed bottle, it's not really going to be much of a weapon. Drink it and say, awesome, can you do me a favor and just sit down? I'll give you the water as soon as you sit down. Take a drink, you look dehydrated. Anything I can do to shape that environment. So reducing crowding is super important. Moving them away from a table where there's lots of glasses and bottles and things that can be weapons, super important. Taking them out to the sidewalk. Amazing, really good. We had a guy go into the kitchen at the restaurant, and that's a dangerous place to intervene with someone. So one of the bouncers asked him to come out into the alley. He stepped out into the alley. And then the guy came out into the alley. The other bouncer was inside making sure that he couldn't go back into the kitchen. And as soon as the guy stepped into this steamy dumpster, garbage bag ridden, rat strewn alley, it became like every bad movie you've ever seen. He realized there were two of us, and suddenly all of the bravado he had in front of the cooks disappeared. That's shaping. Get rid of, any feeling of cornering, provide them with exits, give them choices, take away objects, take away weapons, take away crowds. Amazing. Loud noises, bright lights, if you're working in clubs, all of these things can be huge factors. If you're working in schools, getting them into the hallway, it's a different environment. When a hallway's empty, kids tend to quiet down right away. They become more aware of their tone. It's easier to get the volume down. All of those things are great. Those are shaping. Sometimes we get into difficult areas. I talk about this with arguing with delusion. Generally, I'll let a delusion fly. If you have even if it's not a complete delusion, but you're amped up and you're telling me what you're going to do, if I disagree with it, but it's not harmful to anyone, I'll let it ride. But the minute it becomes something that you can't let it to happen, you have to politely disagree, right? So things, sometimes it won't even be a statement. Sometimes a guy's going to be like de-escalating, but he's going to be ramping and ranting. He's getting too close, and you go, look, man, I totally hear you and I want to hear the rest, but I need you to take 3 steps back. All right, you're gonna need to do me a favor and sit down for a second. Right? Now that I'm older, when I do work, I'll be like, listen, man, I'm an old man, you're freaking me out, but can you do me a favor? Just take a breath with me, take a step back, and I'll take a step back. If I ask you to take a step back and I take a step back, whether or not you take a step back, I've added a step. And if I just take a step back without addressing it, oftentimes people just come in. But if I go, look, man, do me a favor and take a step back, and I take a step back, even if they go, wait a minute, I'm not going to take a step back, they've never yet noticed that I've taken a step back. But if I just try to quietly shift, and then the guy just keeps coming, almost like a magnet, and then say, hey, do me a favor, and you stay there. He goes, oh, fuck you, you don't tell me what to do. They keep coming. So asking someone to take a step back as you take a step back. If I ask you to look, can you do me a favor, just lower your hands? I might lower my hands a little bit. And if all they do is lower their hands a little bit, it's better for me. It's less confrontational. But very often, if I say, can you lower your hands, and I go down a little bit, or I drop one that's more visible, but I keep the other one up, they'll lower their hands fully. So I'll mirror it, but never as fully as them generally. Stepping back, I'll go as much as I can. I'll take 2. Lowering my hands, I'll never drop my hands all the way. If I had a knife to my neck and I brought my hands up and the guy said, put your hands down. Yeah, of course. I'll go like this if I can, rather than slap my thighs and have them dumbly at the side. So you only do things to the degree that serves you. If it serves you to do it a lot, like take 2 steps back, you take 2 steps back. If it doesn't serve you, like lowering your hands, I try to do it less if I can, right? That's always a general goal. Within the domain of touch, if you want to Google research, check out the term therapeutic touch. Now, therapeutic touch is most research supported within the domain of dementia and Alzheimer's particularly. Delusion, sometimes because of medication. So in those domains, there is research that touching somebody in appropriate areas at appropriate times can cause de-escalation, right? So that might be the shoulder from optimal maximal distance at a flank, never face to face leaning down in front of you, from an angle off to a side. So if you were looking forward and I was over here and I was touching your shoulder, that puts me at a safe angle. That can be a good thing to do. If you immediately respond, I immediately take more distance and I don't touch anymore. If shoulder works, we can go to like outside of forearm or elbow. Cuffing the elbow is a very, very good thing for escort positions and control. It allows me to monitor if I'm on top of your elbow. There's even research that if that works from shoulder to elbow, you go down to back of hand. And there's even one study that cited hand massage with people with dementia. So if you're home caring for somebody who's really escalated, that can be a goal to go from shoulder to elbow, and you might stop there. And even back of hand, if I can touch back of hand, get to the point that your hand's feeling a little tense, would it be okay if would you like a hand massage? I'll ask for permission. Anything I'm uncertain of, I will ask for permission, and that massively reduces the shock. If they go, no, don't touch me. Okay, no problem. I won't do it. But it's only within the domain of dementia that there's any research establishing that. If we go within research domains just about good old-fashioned agitation, whatever it's from, right? It could be mental illness, it could be narcotics, it could be rage. Touch is very rarely a good idea, certainly not early on. A helpful thing to remember is that agitation is at its core rooted in disorientation. And if I touch and it's not understood, if it gets misunderstood, it will escalate. It will augment the disorientation. So if you want to touch, a very good rule is to ask for permission. Listen, if it's something that's not offensive, like, listen, just do me a favor, take a breath. I'm just going to step over here to give you more space. I will tell you what I'm doing if I have to do it. I have to take more space to feel safe myself. I will simply do it and I will tell you. If it's intervening, would it be okay if I just touched your shoulder? All right, come over here for a second and I'll tell you. If the guy says, fuck off, no problem. I'm just going to take more space then. I'm going to give you a little bit more room to breathe. And I will step back more. So that can be very helpful. My good friend Mike Malpass, when we taught at our Total Restraint Camp in 2019, he talks about this in terms of checking for compliance. And when Mike approaches someone, he'll approach from the side and he cuffs the elbow. I tend to cuff the elbow and then open like a door to invite if I have to. And if I don't have to touch, I'll reach for your elbow, even if there's like a half meter between my hand and my elbow, and I'll kind of psychically keep it near your elbow as I open the door and invite you to go.
You work for me.
Grab your
No,
sweatshirt.
you got a gun, sir.
Okay, you're about to go to jail, so grab your stuff. Let's go.
At what probable cause?
Probable cause is you've been asked to leave more than twice.
Where's
so now
the
you're
trespass?
You've been asked to leave.
Okay, let's go outside and trespass me.
Let's go. Grab your stuff.
I don't walk forward.
Tyler, just don't make it more difficult than it
No,
needs to be.
I have no gun.
Tyler.
Now can you walk forward?
Nope, let's go.
Grab your coat.
And then when I follow, I never follow behind. I always want to follow at an angle, but not necessarily a complete 45, because at a complete 45, if I see the guy doing this, I'm agitating. So I would like to be at an angle almost like my window that's right here to the side, maybe a 30-degree angle, so that the guy can, if I see them doing this and they can easily see me in the peripheral without getting disoriented, I'm not usually escalating. I'll very rarely move to a complete lateral flank. I'll always be at least one step behind because I want to have the advantage of being closer to their back if I do have to rush in, intervene, or attack in any scenario. Never surprise somebody with a touch. Never approach from the back center. Even if you think it's going to give you a brief advantage, it generally will backfire in your face. And again, when people argue, oh, when I come in from the back, I blitz them, they don't see it. Great, but that's a domination mindset. You're only thinking about winning and crushing. You're not thinking about empathy. You're not thinking about their needs. You're not thinking about de-escalation. You're not worried about whether or not you cause more distress and more disorientation. You're just trying to get them down, and that's just going to begin a negative spiral. For me, touch is a decision point. It's not a technique. It is a test. As Mike says, a test for compliance. If I ask, can I, and you say no, or I say, I'm gonna, and I do it, you say, ah, and you respond, then that just gave me some information, and I will create more distance and change strategies as a result. There's a very detailed study by Terrell, and it's Terrell, Terrill, and Mastrovsky in 2003, and they used a systematic social observation of police suspect encounters. They found that when encounters began with some form of force on force, premature touch, etc., that subjects showed higher subsequent resistance. So if you touch too soon, you're gonna make them fight back. And officers generally had to use more force later in the exact same encounter dynamic. In other words, hands-on too early is not neutral, and it changes the trajectory almost always in a negative direction. The Public Health Agency here in Canada has a trauma-informed approach to physical intervention, freely available on the site, and they specifically mention touch without warning or permission as a common cause of traumatization and dysregulation. I'm going to say it again, touch without warning or permission. I'm going to read their 6 steps of trauma-informed policing. Step 1, realize, acknowledge the widespread impact of trauma and understand how it may affect individuals, victims, witnesses, and offenders. Sounds self-evident. A lot of people go, well, yeah. But if you go, snowflake, I don't care what the fuck if you're triggering. If you have that mindset, de-escalation is never going to work. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to teach de-escalation to people who fundamentally have no desire for it to work. They don't want it to work. So of course it's not going to work. If you do not have an understanding about the reality of the effects of victimization, if you do not realize that even sometimes the suspect, whether or not you want to call them a bad guy or whatever you're doing in your own verbiage, if you don't realize that suspects can accelerate based on your behavior and you just don't care, if your mindset is, I got a job to do, it's not my problem, you're not worried about how it looks or what effects it has, then de-escalation is probably not going to work. After realizing, it's recognize. Recognize, learn how to identify signs and symptoms of trauma in people you encounter. This can include cognitive emotional responses. So we know we have fight, so we know what combative aggression cues look like. We have flight, somebody just trying to get away. How many excessive force videos have we seen where people are just trying to get away and they just get like tackled with full force? Maybe it's excessive just because you're not recognizing that you could have contained that individual and then tried to bring them down to a better place. So we have fight, we have flight, we have freeze. Sometimes people don't respond because they're in a state of tonic immobility and they're rocking. And then people smack them and they attack them and they charge in. Recognize that freezing can happen to all of us. It is a biological response. We are freezing to not look threatening, and then you're attacking someone. Another response that's often overlooked, we have fight, flight, freeze, and fawning. And fawning is when I try to supplicate and I try to please, like, okay, yeah, I'll do whatever you want, absolutely. And I'm too agreeable, but sometimes because my reflexive being is fawning to please, but another part of me is instinctively trying to run away, I look like I'm just full of shit. I look like, okay, yeah, whatever you say, but I'm trying to run away. So they can overlap. And then that gets misunderstood. And people just go, oh, the guy's lying to me, and I take it as an ego assault. But fight, flight, freeze, and fawn are natural biological responses that we are all prone to. And the deeper you understand that, then the more able you are to avoid escalating those things. Recognize it, contain it, give them some space. The third step is rethinking it. Adapt your thinking and approaches, consider flexibility in procedures, reduce power imbalances. This is such a big thing. Adjust the settings and responses to the trauma informed. Where I teach at the college, guys, we have our criminology department and we have our police tech department. The police tech guys start off in their uniforms and they get a sense of themselves, and very often they start walking down the hallway like they own the entire school and the building and all the areas they go to, and they trigger resentment. And I always say to people that I know in that program, you want to become the neighborhood cop. You want to become somebody who knows everyone, who's friendly. This is the beginning of your training. If you immediately are triggering all the things that police will trigger, all of the negative perceptions, all of the resistance, people that think police have overreach and are excessively forceful, and you respond by pushing back, you're sort of planting the seeds, laying the foundation for escalating that problem. So from the very first second, you got to rethink how you want to be seen, expect the negative, and then transmute it. Don't just push back and fight it. The fourth step is responding. Implement trauma-informed practices. Adjust your interview techniques, your reporting techniques, your environmental communication style. Ensure that your responses do not traumatize. I remember when I started off, learning, certifying in handcuffing and arresting and police pressure points and all the rest of it, there was a movement just then in the mid-90s to get away from, spread your legs, bend over, phrases like that, which are things that we want the subject to do when entering, but spread your legs and bend over have negative connotations. And early on, when I would tell people to say things like, can you please separate your feet? Can you do me a favor and lean forward? They'd be like, oh, what is this hippy dippy shit? But if you've ever been, I've been overseas and, wrongly mistaken Homeland Security once zip tied me because they misidentified me. It happens, right? There's misunderstandings. When you felt what that's like, sometimes, guys, just in scenario training, when I'm training police, I volunteer to be the subject. Jesus, the intensity with which they come in, it's really dehumanizing. And for some people, it's emasculating. It makes them feeble. it triggers me. It makes me want to punch them. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but it's just everybody responds differently. I don't respond well to unwanted touch. I can tell you that. The fifth step is reduce. Aim for a do no more harm stance. Reduce the risk of additional trauma. Minimize the use of force. Reassess policies that may trigger trauma responses. Again, guys, it all goes back to step one. If you don't admit there's a problem and accept that there's a need, then you're going to think all of this is just flaky crap. But the minute you introspect and you say, yeah, I want to be as well received by the widest sample of people possible, it changes. For me, working in security overseas in foreign countries was really when I adopted what I call the idea of being a good tourist. I want to fit in. I'm a stranger here. I don't want to get the entire village mad at me, the whole city mad at me, the legal system mad at me. We should all behave like good tourists, even in our local area. And then the sixth step is review. Continuously evaluate and improve your trauma-informed responses. Audit your policies. Seek continuous training. Train the outcomes. Embed trauma-informed culture within the organization. Look, it's going to take time. If you're interested, I have previous podcasts with interviews with trauma-informed instructors. I discuss trauma-informed self-defense. I have one on trauma-informed yoga and trauma-informed training. There is an entire domain in there. I've met police officers who have been traumatized from youth, and that's why they became police officers. And then they get traumatized in the line of fire in work, and they get PTSD, and they deny, and they go forward at one speed, and they never improve. If you don't recognize that you have a problem, it's never going to be changed. So my first suggestion is watch some videos, listen to some of the podcasts that I have from previous episodes and nothing else, and then get yourself a few books, go get a course. Play with one idea. If you add one trauma-informed sensitivity into your work, it is going to pay dividends. It is only going to benefit you. There is this notion so often with professionals that, wow, it's going to make me vulnerable. It's just going to get me killed. I can't lower my shields. You're not lowering your shields. If I understand that I'm making you nervous and I speak to you respectfully and I give you some bit of power to lessen the imbalance and I say, look, I'm just going to give you more space and I step back, that is going to give me more reaction time. That is going to cool the suspect down. That is going to help save my life. So good technique with sensitivity doesn't have to make you more vulnerable. It should make you safer all the time. I'm going to give you just a few general pointers. I wrote down, I brainstormed a lot of stuff. Things that I see all the time in role playing, especially with police. So we talk about first seeking permission when possible. You don't always, right? Sometimes you do have to go in and touch. Sometimes I do it. Sometimes I tell you as I do it, listen, I got to go here, right? It's not my fault. My boss needs me to get you out of here. Other times I will seek permission. When it's possible, ask, is it okay if? You'd be amazed at the difference this makes in how you're received. Narrate the intent. Narrate your intent. Tell them what you're doing. Look, I got to be here. You're not allowed to be in this part of the building. I'm sorry. Do me a favor. Let's step on over here, right? So that we can have a little bit more time to talk. We have time. We have time to de-escalate this, all right? We have time to talk this through. We talked about empathy first. I can validate your experience without agreeing. Right? We talk about this in Verbal Mastery 1 in my download. I go into detail about empathy doesn't mean agreeing. So I can say, look, I see you're agitated, or obviously you feel like I've done something wrong here. I can see I've pissed you off. I can acknowledge and empathize and then take steps to reduce that without saying, you know what, you're right. I was an asshole. I had no right. Because if I agree to something, I cement myself into a corner and it can be harder to negotiate. So empathy doesn't need to make you vulnerable. It just means that you're validating their experience and you're, again, lessening that power imbalance. Things like height dominance. Be cautious. If you're naturally tall, take more distance so you don't appear as threatening. If somebody is on the ground laying down and I'm at a safe distance, squat tactically in a manner that's safe. If somebody's seated, don't tower over them. Give them distance. Distance is one of the best things to equal out height without you needing to change much. Sometimes lowering my chin. Again, if I'm at a super good distance and I'm not getting more vulnerable. We never do anything to make ourselves more vulnerable. Sunglasses. So often I see bodyguards and cops wearing sunglasses. If I get into a protracted de-escalation, I'll take them off. I'll make eye-to-eye contact with you. I'll keep my hands visible. I'll say, okay, man. Always an offense because I'm trying to de-escalate you. I keep my facial expressions neutral, pretty much like I've kept them throughout this podcast. Always avoid cornering, always avoid crowding, always try to reduce any external social pressure possible. I will always tell people why I'm doing what I'm doing. It is, this is why I have to do this. I'll give warnings. So if you take one or two ideas from this that work for you, and you just say, yeah, these make sense, I see how I can implement those. And you start from that intervention basis first, as if we are all fellow citizens on the spaceship Earth and we're all equal and you just made a mistake and I'm here to try to make sure it doesn't become a bigger mistake. If we take it from that approach, very rarely do I need to touch somebody hard. I see so many people training the push. And again, in my defense against mobs, if 3-4 people are coming in, I'm trying to verbally de-escalate, it's not working, I will push, I will roll, I will ram, I'll make space, and I'll run. Because that's a very urgent circumstance. In a weapon encounter, something like that, sometimes a push and run is safer, right? So pushing is a great tool. But for me, it's an assault. It's no longer a touch, it's a hit. And it can be a light hit and it can be a really, really severe hit, depending on. I can do it with intent and make it pretty hard. To an extent, pushing is rolling the dice. There's so many videos of elderly people being pushed lightly. There's one of an elderly lady like this, and the cop just pushes like that in the arm and she stumbles because her balance is so terrible. You can't know what the results are going to be. You push somebody lightly, they turn, they fall on a bottle, they smack their head on the ground. There can be huge consequences. So for me, it is a hit, even if it's just done like that, and it's hard to determine what the results are. Pushing is more variable in its effect than punching. So yes, it's true. You'll punch a guy 5 times and you never know what the 5 are going to do. They'll all have different effects. But pushing is even more so. So I need to be extremely cautious. Do not train, touch, and particularly push in a manner that is cavalier. We refer to it as the principle of the matador. We let that spring kind of stay here. My fence never collapses on me. If I have a choice, it's always at about 45 degrees or outside. And then I try to get out of the way like a matador. Footwork, movement, positioning, shifting. Even if I'm slow and old, I will try to turn and guide with my hands. Those are always my first focuses. Now, this is a deep topic, guys, and it's something that I have been, even before I had names for it, my nature was always such that I sought to avoid and de-escalate. Maybe it's the Canadian in me. I don't know. I was deep into psychology, deep into things like detaching from ego in my earliest years. And I was riding ego like a wild bull when I was 19, 20 and, my early days of bouncing. But every experience that I had, I sought to deconstruct it to make myself better. And certainly for the past 15, 20 years, I have a huge amount of research and publication that has been done on the topic of de-escalation, sensitivity to things like excited delirium, avoidance, compassionate restraint. I use the term responsible power since 1995. It's something that I deeply, deeply believe in. And for me, it's the foundation of a scalable platform. Compassion does not make you a weaker feral self-defense expert. I have tons of videos on feral technique. When I teach military, we go through the whole gamut. From the peacekeeper mindset to the feral kind of assassin special forces mindset. You can have them all and they can coexist like planets spinning in individual orbits. So no part of compassion makes you weaker. Read any of the books of the greatest warriors, particularly the samurai, and you will see that the greatest compassion exists in the greatest warriors. I often quoted in my early days Santiago Ortega, who was a cultural anthropologist, and he said, the greatest hunter always has an uneasiness before the kill. No matter how accomplished you get, you should be aware and you should be mindful. I forget which Special Forces soldier it was. I'll probably find it in my research and pop it at the bottom of the screen. I want to say it was either a SEAL or a Ranger. And he said that I wasn't good at killing. Nobody can become good at violence. That's a ridiculous ego-driven claim to make. I was charged with the responsibility of doing it, and I had to do it in order to protect my country and get back to my family. I didn't relish the fact that I had to be competent at it. I was surgical. right? As I'm always seeking compassion in my work, and compassion has made me stronger. It has healed PTSD. It has made me better received. It has helped me avoid so many instances of violence. It has shaped my life. And there are always areas when you're good in the field, in your personal life, you're lacking. Sometimes it takes decades to figure it out, but I'm getting there slowly. Yeah. So I submit all of these thoughts, guys, because I am every single day in contact with either students of mine that are out in the field working in intervention, or people coming back, special forces, military, police with PTSD or with various problems. The solution is always the same. Go back to the drawing board, increase your compassion, come from a place of empathy rather than competition, and get rid of those unhealthy amounts of ego. We need some level of ego to feel secure, but it gets in the way sometimes, and we got to make sure we don't have too much. Keep it authentic and keep it safe.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, check out Kevin's latest release, his newly revised second edition of his best-selling book, Safe School, available worldwide on Amazon. With newly added sections and over 100 new illustrations, it's the perfect read for caregivers and interventionists.
Guys, I hope you enjoy the topic. Sorry for the ramble. It's an area of deep study for me, and I don't want this podcast to go too long, but I wanted to share some thoughts because in the past few weeks in particular, I had a lot of people reach out to me with issues that are solved by this topic. Until next week, stay safe and stay strong.